In our headlines on this Wednesday, April 22nd, here in South Korea. President Lee Jae-myung and his Vietnamese counterpart To Lam are sitting down for their summit in Hanoi on this Wednesday to touch upon trade, supply chains and more. Elsewhere, U.S. President Donald Trump extends his two-week ceasefire with Iran, reportedly at the request of Pakistan, while awaiting a, quote, unified peace proposal from Tehran. Meanwhile, here on the local front, findings by the Bank of Korea show the producer price index standing at 125.2 in March, up 1.6% on month, the highest monthly jump since April 2022. We start over in Hanoi today, where President Lee Jae-myung and his Vietnamese counterpart To Lam are scheduled to sit down for their summit. High on their agenda is partnership in advancing trade and in building resilient supply chains. Arirang's Yoon Jung-min files this report.
The South Korean president has touched down in Hanoi for his state visit, having wrapped up his trip to New Delhi. President Lee Jae-myung will meet To Lam, Vietnam's top leader and general secretary of the Communist Party. It will be their second engagement in about 8 months, following To Lam's state visit to Korea last August. The summit will include an exchange of documents, a joint press conference, and a state dinner. High on the agenda is cooperation in trade, nuclear energy, supply chains, and critical minerals. The two countries plan to increase bilateral trade to $150 billion a year by 2030.
Amid growing global uncertainties, we will strengthen communication to establish an economic and security partnership, including stable energy, supply chains, and critical mineral cooperation.
Science cooperation, cultural and people-to-people exchanges are also on the agenda. During his stay, the South Korean leader will meet Vietnamese Prime Minister Lee Min-hung and National Assembly Chairman Chen Tai-man, ranked number 2 and number 3 respectively in the country's power structure. A business forum is also scheduled.
Diplomatic officials say the president's trip to this fast-growing nation carries significance as South Korea explores opportunities to expand its diplomatic horizon at a crucial time in geopolitics. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Hanoi.
Earlier on this Wednesday, President Lee Jae-myung hosted a luncheon for the Korean community in Hanoi. And at the event, he vowed to actively address challenges faced by overseas Koreans. He also highlighted the needs of multicultural families, noting that there are now some 100,000 Korean Vietnamese households across both nations. Vietnam is home to the 5th largest Korean community in the world and the largest in ASEAN, with a population of roughly 200,000. Now, for more insight on this latest interaction between President Lee Jae-myung and his Vietnamese counterpart To Lam in Hanoi on this Wednesday, I turn to a counterpart at the national broadcaster Vietnam Television. Lê Hằng Minh, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for having us.
Let's start with a few words on the overall atmosphere there as the two leaders are scheduled to sit down for their summit.
President Lee Jae-myung's visit is quite significant, not only because Vietnam and South Korea have built strong ties over decades, but also because President Lee Jae-myung is among the first foreign heads of state to visit Vietnam after the 16th National Assembly of Vietnam finalized organizational structure and key state personnel, where Party General Secretary To Lam was elected as state president of Vietnam. So there's definitely a sense that this is a highly anticipated visit, with a lot of interest on both sides. Vietnamese ambassador to South Korea, Vũ Ho, has said the visit could elevate bilateral cooperation with a vision towards the 2030-2045 period, while South Korean ambassador to Vietnam, Thuy Yang Sam, describes it as an opportunity to open a new golden era in bilateral relations.
In the meantime, then, what aspects of this summit are making media headlines there in Vietnam?
The state visit of President Lee Jae-myung has received strong media attention here. In the lead-up, Vietnamese outlets have been highlighting the depth of the relationship, describing it as long-term, increasingly substantive, and even a strategic anchor for the future. To illustrate, South Korea remains Vietnam's largest foreign investors with cumulative registered capital exceeding $90 billion and one of its leading trading partners with two-way trade estimated at around $88 billion in 2025, up 8% year-on-year. So far, more than 350,000 Vietnamese are living in South Korea, including around 100,000 Vietnam-Korea multicultural families. In tourism, South Korea was Vietnam's second largest source of visitors last year, with 4.3 million arrivals, accounting for 21% of total international visitors.
The first foreign leader to be hosted by the Lee Jae-myung administration upon entering office last June was the Vietnamese leader, and it appears that this is also the case for the To Lam administration following its re-election earlier this year. What have Vietnamese pundits been saying with regard to the significance of Seoul-Hanoi ties, especially in light of the current geopolitical environment?
What you mentioned really underscores the significance of this visit. Vietnamese ambassador to South Korea, Vũ Ho, noted that the visit comes at a time when bilateral ties are at their most advanced stage, with both countries well positioned to contribute to shaping an open, inclusive and rules-based regional architecture, thereby supporting not only their respective national interest, but also broader regional stability and prosperity. Meanwhile, South Korean ambassador to Vietnam, Choi Young-sam, expects that the partnership between our two countries, seen as key cooperative partners not only within ASEAN but also globally, will become a strong pillar, playing a leading role in promoting peace and shared prosperity in the region and the world.
Hang Meng, with regard to the public, what appears to be the overall impression of South Korea among people there?
Vietnamese people generally have a strong admiration and affection for South Korea's contributions to development in both countries across many fields. In sports, for example, the public widely recognizes the impact of Korean experts, especially coaches like Park Hang-seo and Kim Sang-sik, who have helped elevate Vietnamese football in recent years. At the same time, South Korea's entertainment industry is extremely popular in Vietnam, particularly K-pop, with a large and enthusiastic fan base. And there have been suggestions to develop K-pop training models in Vietnam to help nurture local V-pop talent. And of course, Korean brands such as Samsung, LG and Lotte are very familiar to Vietnamese consumers, not only for their quality products and services, but also for their contributions to employment and economic growth. Overall, the impression of South Korea in Vietnam is very positive, and that sentiment extends to President Lee Jae-myung's visit as well.
All right, Lê Hang Minh, thank you so much for making the time to share your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
U.S. President Donald Trump has extended his ceasefire with Iran at the request of Pakistan. Our An Sung-jin has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced an open-ended extension of the temporary ceasefire with Iran. This comes just one day before the original two-week truce was set to expire. In a Truth Social post on Tuesday, Trump stated that the military action will be put on hold as, quote, the government of Iran is seriously fractured, but he said the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports would remain in place until Tehran presents a unified proposal within the leadership. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif thanked Trump after he announced the indefinite extension of the ceasefire with Iran. Sharif expressed an appreciation for Washington's willingness to give diplomatic efforts a chance to advance. The extension comes despite Trump's earlier warnings that hostilities could resume if Tehran failed to engage constructively before the original deadline on the evening of April 22nd. He had previously claimed that he was reluctant to prolong the ceasefire, but ultimately reversed course as the expiration approached. Meanwhile, the White House confirmed to reporters that U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance will no longer be traveling to Pakistan. He had been due to arrive there on Wednesday for planned peace talks. The trip, which would have marked his second visit of Islamabad this month, had been aimed at finalizing a potential agreement with Iranian officials. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
And Iran, for its part, has dismissed Mr. Trump's extension of the ceasefire, claiming that the U.S. has already violated it, which is why Tehran is reportedly not taking part in additional peace talks in Pakistan. Our Lee Soo-jin has more.
Iran has decided not to participate in a second round of ceasefire and peace talks with the United States scheduled for Tuesday in Islamabad. According to Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency on Tuesday, the decision was conveyed to Washington through mediator Pakistan, dealing a setback to ongoing diplomatic efforts. Tasnim reports that Tehran had initially agreed to negotiations under a U.S.-accepted 10-point framework following Pakistan's mediation and a U.S. request for a ceasefire. However, Iran now accuses Washington of failing to uphold its commitments almost immediately after the agreement, citing that as the primary reason for pulling out. Tasnim added that a hostile U.S. response over reopening the Strait of Hormuz further influenced Tehran's decision. The agency said Iran now sees continued negotiations as futile, with little prospect of reaching a meaningful agreement under current conditions. Iran is also questioning the intent behind U.S. President Donald Trump's latest announcement of a ceasefire extension, warning it could respond militarily if Washington maintains its naval blockade. State media reports Tehran will not recognize the extension and will act based on its national interests. Officials warn that as long as a blockade remains in place, Iran will not reopen the Strait of Hormuz and could use force if necessary to break it. Meanwhile, Iran is taking the dispute to the international stage. The Iranian mission to the United Nations has sent a letter calling on the UN and the Security Council to issue what it described as a firm and unequivocal condemnation of the U.S. decision to attack and seize an Iranian-flagged cargo ship. In a statement posted on X, the mission said the incident constitutes a grave breach of international law, a clear violation of the ceasefire, and an act of aggression bearing what it called the hallmarks of piracy. It warned that such actions endanger international navigation and undermine maritime safety and security. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Here in South Korea, the producer price index for the month of March posted its highest monthly hike in almost 4 years. Our economics correspondent Park Jun-han touches upon this tangible fallout of the prolonged unrest in the Middle East.
South Korean households may feel the effects of rising consumer prices in the coming months, as the producer price index for March recorded the largest monthly increase in nearly 4 years. According to data released by the Bank of Korea on Wednesday, the PPI reached 125.24 in March, a 1.6% jump from the previous month. This marks the 7th consecutive monthly increase since September last year, and the largest monthly rise since April 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. The primary driver was the sudden volatility in energy markets. As March marked the first full month of the conflict in the Middle East, global oil prices saw a dramatic spike. This led to a 31.9% surge in coal and petroleum products, the highest increase in the sector since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Chemical products also rose 6.7%, while overall industrial goods prices climbed 3.5%. For average consumers, a rise in the producer price index, especially driven by higher energy costs, means costs are likely to be passed on through higher product prices.
At its core, it's a cost issue. These are the prices producers pay, which feed into intermediate goods and eventually into final consumer products. So when prices rise at the front end, they gradually pass through the supply chain. Ultimately, that shows up as inflation.
An official from the Bank of Korea warned that future movements remain highly uncertain due to ongoing negotiation risks in the Middle East. For now, both consumers and policymakers will be watching closely to see how import-dependent Korea absorbs these rising production costs before they reach the average shopper. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
In the meantime, though, tensions in the Middle East appear to be having little impact on investor sentiment on the local bourse. The benchmark KOSPI soared past the 6,400 mark for the first time on this Wednesday. Following volatile intraday trading, the index closed at a record 6,417.9, up over 29 points, or more than 0.4%. This historic milestone builds on the previous session's massive 2.7% jump, surpassing the record set prior to the outbreak of the Iran conflict roughly 2 months ago. The head of U.S. forces based here in South Korea is in Washington, D.C., responding to questions about the U.S.'s security posture here in this part of the world, given the Trump administration's military campaign against Iran. Our Ian Jin reports.
U.S. Forces Korea Commander General Xavier Brunson testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee on Tuesday, which came following reports last month that the U.S. military has repositioned part of its THAAD missile defense system in South Korea toward the Middle East to back up America's war efforts against Iran. To this, Brunson said that the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, designed to intercept short, medium, and intermediate-range ballistic missiles using hit-to-kill technology, quote, still remains on the peninsula currently. He added that munitions are being sent to the Middle East, which were ready and waiting to be moved. During the Senate hearing in Washington, Brunson said that the presence of U.S. forces in Korea was strategic, vital to defending American interests in the region. Saying that the U.S. military is adapting to the rapidly evolving strategic dilemmas of regional security, he underscored that his focus remains strictly on capabilities over numbers. Brunson also emphasized the need that political expediency does not outpace the conditions for the transfer of wartime operational control OPCON to South Korea from the U.S. Saying that the presence of the U.S. forces is a baseline, he emphasized the conditions needed to be met for the transfer of OPCON as South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's administration continues to push forward in achieving the transition within its 5-year term that ends in 2030. 이은진, Arirang News.
In other news now, there is a new sport in town and it's gaining much interest both from the young and old here. That being said, my colleague Cho Young-eun tried her hand at pickleball.
It looks a bit like tennis and a bit like badminton. At this outdoor court, people are picking up paddles to hit a lightweight plastic ball punctured with holes. They are playing what is known as pickleball. Though still unfamiliar to some, pickleball is a sport that combines elements of tennis, badminton, and table tennis. It can be played both indoors and outdoors on a badminton-sized court with a slightly lower net. This pickleball is lightweight and holding a paddle is simple. Grab the handle naturally, form a V with your thumb and index finger, and use a forehand drive, similar to tennis. Each rally begins with an underhand serve below the waist, and games are typically played to 11 points. Simplicity is its biggest appeal. With short games and easy-to-learn rules, this sport has a low barrier to entry, making it accessible to everyone from children to seniors.
I think the most appealing part is that once you learn the basic rules, anyone can easily jump into a game. I play almost every day of the week.
I had been doing other sports for over 10 years, but I got injured, so I started looking for alternatives. I came across pickleball. I saw that it's very popular in the U.S., and I've been playing it for about 1.5 years now.
And once one person starts playing, they inevitably invite their friends too.
So my wife is Korean, and her friend was playing pickleball here, and then my wife's friend got my wife into pickleball, so now I'm into pickleball. And, you know, we have $200 pickleball paddle later, here I am.
Since its first creation in the USA in 1965, pickleball has surged in popularity in the United States in recent years. In Korea, momentum is building just as quickly following the official launch of the Korea Pickleball Association. The sport's base has expanded within months. New facilities are also emerging, including a recently opened complex at Gwangnaru Hangang Park in Seoul, featuring 14 dedicated pickleball courts.
At first, many in their 60s and older couldn't even go to the market or ride a bike because their legs hurt. But after playing pickleball for 2 to 3 years, they say they can now walk to shop and visit stores again. Hearing this is incredibly rewarding.
As Korea moves towards becoming a super-age society, sports like pickleball could become a meaningful alternative for leisure and welfare. 조영은, Arirang News.
And South Korea, well known for its long working hours, is now waking up to the importance of a good night's sleep. In fact, a growing number of workers are choosing to spend their lunch break napping rather than eating. Our Kim Jun-hong was out and about.
It's lunchtime and the streets of Seoul's Gangnam district quickly fill with office workers stepping out to eat. But 25-year-old Park Kyung-jin skips the rush, heading instead to a nearby sleep cafe. Inside a dim, quiet room with a bed, she lies down and soon falls asleep.
I heard about this place from my coworkers and decided to give it a try. I usually don't get enough sleep and feel tired all the time. So instead of lunch and coffee, I'd rather have extra sleep to stay productive in the afternoon.
With earplugs and eye masks, massage chairs and relaxing music, this calming spot draws workers like Park at lunchtime.
About 90% of our customers are office workers from nearby, and those coming from farther away say they wish there were a place like this near their office.
Trading meals for sleep shows how little Koreans are sleeping.
Koreans sleep an average of 6 hours and 50 minutes per night, about an hour and a half less than the OECD average. That makes Korea one of the lowest ranking countries in the OECD for sleep, with sleep disorders also on the rise.
Longer working hours and intense competition are key drivers of this pattern in a culture that places a premium on productivity and visible results.
Koreans have a strong focus on how things appear to others. But sleep is a highly personal, private activity that isn't visible, so it's often overlooked and pushed aside.
But changing lifestyles and growing interest in inner wellness are beginning to shift perceptions. Such changes are reflected in the rapid growth of the sleep industry. The value of South Korea's sleep market has grown more than tenfold over the past decade, reaching about $3.4 billion last year. The global market is expected to hit around $98 billion this year. The range of products is also diversifying, from mattresses and pillows to health supplements, aromatherapy, and lighting. In particular, South Korea is emerging as a key player in sleep tech, combining advanced ICT with personalized sleep solutions.
For example, lighting systems integrated with smart technology can turn off as users fall asleep, adjust to an optimal color tone, or trigger personalized wake-up sounds.
Changing lifestyles and a growing thirst for a better sleep is giving rise to a new business frontier. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
Today, we've got some rain on the way for the southern regions and Jeju Island. Now, because there's fine yellow dust in the air, some of that rain could dissolve it, so you want to avoid getting caught in it if possible. The rain will taper off by tomorrow morning in the south, but on Jeju, it'll stick around a bit longer, lasting into the daytime hours tomorrow. In terms of rainfall amount, Jeju could see around 10 to 80 millimeters. Meanwhile, for areas missing out on the rain, especially Gangwon-do and northern Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces, dry conditions will prevail, and they remain under a dry weather advisory, so please take extra care. As for temperatures, Seoul will start the day at 10 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 7 degrees, Daejeon at 9 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 22 degrees, Daegu at 20 degrees, Busan at 18 degrees. Starting tomorrow, we'll be back to typical late April spring weather, which means mild afternoons, but still a pretty big day-to-night temperature difference. So make sure to dress in layers. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at the Sahar in South Korea. Coming up now is our daily panel session.